Okay, yeah, we are going to talk today about Succos after Shemittah, our last topic. Mir Hashem, it was cheaper. Mir Hashem, our last topic in our series about Shemittah. Hopefully, we're going to have enough time to finish it all. Okay, so we know, before I get to the Succos part of it, is Shemittah, the halachas of Shemittah don't end when Shemittah ends. For example, fruits, their halachas primarily tend to be after Shemittah. There's even some slichin type rules that are after Shemittah we had. There's all different certain rules, and there's one special mitzvah that has nothing to do with Shemittah per se, which is the mitzvah of Hakel, which we don't do anymore, which is on the Succos after Shemittah. But we don't talk about Succos, mainly about the Daled Minim, but also about Tzchach also, and what they have to do with Shemittah. Okay, and a lot of what I'm going to say today is related to comes from what I saw on Rav Weiss as something very well done about this. Okay, so let's do the Daled Minim. We'll start with that. That's our main thing we're going to talk about. The first one is the Aravos. Is the easiest. Is the Aravos. Aravos are a piece of wood. Aravos don't have any. For sure, there's no reason to think that they have any kedusha shvius like that. Of course, you can't do malach on the ground to grow your Arava tree in Eretz Yisrael. But the Aravos themselves should have no kedusha shvius. There's no way that so far that I found anybody who's figured out a way that they should have kedusha shvius yet. Okay. Next up, we'll get a little step up, more complicated, is Hadassim. So if you remember, we spoke about some time ago that something that's meant specifically for fragrance, something that the people use specifically, they like the fragrance of it. It's a shayla in the Yerushalmi, and as a rule, we're machmir on that shayla, and therefore, it's these people work with an assumption that Hadassim have kedusha shvius because they're sold for their fragrance. I mean, think about Svardim making Hadolah, and they use besamim. For their besamim, they use Hadassim. So it's therefore assumed that they have kedusha shvius, which means they're hefker. If somebody wants to cut them off, you can't throw them out, you can't ruin them, etc. Those kind of things like that. Okay. However, that's the typical assumption. However, there's a chiddush in Or Sameach. In all places, you see that you have to know everything to know anything. In Hilchos Parah Aduma, okay, the Or Sameach says the following. Okay. Paraduma. He says like this: the din is that the azoi that you use in sprinkling the paraduma cannot be tamei. Okay, so the Rambam says like this: if a person takes the azoi, cuts it off the ground for eating, I don't know what an azoi is and why you eat it, but we'll believe it. Then it's a food. Food items can become tamei, and therefore, if it even got wet is already enough to be tamei in paradum. That's big enough, and it's already tamei. It's gone. You can't use it anymore. What happens if you cut it off the ground because you want to use it for as a piece of wood, or you picked it off the ground because you want to use it for the mitzvah? You were planning on using it with a paraduma. That's why you cut it off the ground. Then the din is it doesn't make a difference. It can't become tamei. It's not food. It can't become tamei, and therefore you can use it for the paraduma. So the Or Sameach says, what do you see from here? The Rambam says that if you cut it off to use it for the mitzvah, then it's not considered a food item. Okay? It's only if you specifically cut it off as a food item. So he says, you see from here a cloud that when you take something that has potential to be used as a food item, but you cut it off the ground because you want to use it for this mitzvah, you had some mitzvah intention to use this thing for it automatically does not have the status of food. And therefore, he doesn't say for Hadassim specifically, but he does say for kedusha shvius, for the rules of kedusha shvius, if you cut something off the ground to use it for a mitzvah, that thing does not have kedusha shvius because it's not a food. Okay, theoretically it's a food, but you didn't cut off the ground for a food, and therefore it does not have kedusha shvius. We're going to talk more about Or Sameach as we go on today. But in the Hadassim, that would mean is if I plan and cut off Hadassim in order to do it for the mitzvah, which is most of the Hadassim that we get, we don't just walk into a forest and say, hey, I'll take 3 of those, and use them for the mitzvah. We take them because we take one that was specifically cut for the mitzvah. Then according to this chiddush of this Or Sameach, I'm not everybody agrees to that, but according to this chiddush of the Or Sameach, they should not have kedusha shvius. Okay? We're going to come back to this Or Sameach. He has more to say on what we're talking about today. Okay.
I think that's the smell of the meeting.
I don't know what you mean.
I think about smelling Esrog.
Yeah, what?
No, it's focused on the mitzvah, you're not supposed to still be asked to return.
Right, so here, it's even better here, because here...
Because why?
Now, because when you're cutting it off, you don't want it for fragrance.
But people cut off Hadassim, that is what they're for. I mean, when you go to the florist, they sell them for fragrance. That's why they sell them. Right. It is an item that is meant for food use.
But even if alcohol,
no.
You're not cutting it off.
Right. So what it is like this. If you have a food that generally has a certain use that has Kedusha Shvias, and you have one guy didn't cut off for that doesn't help. Okay, so if it's 50-50, like some people use this and that, it depends on your kavanah. But if it overall is a thing, if you take an apple, you can't say apples don't have Kedusha Shvias because I wanted to decorate my sukkah with them. You mean an apple's an apple? You know?
So it would depend on how Hadassim or what they're grown for. Let's say most Ashkenazi Hadassim.
So it could be, if you're going to tell me that in the world most Hadassim are grown for the mitzvah, then yeah, you would be right. But I'm coming from a different angle, that this specific plant was planted for the mitzvah, or was cut off for the mitzvah. That's Arshim wants to say he's not talking about Hadassim. You'll hear what he's talking about in a minute. But he says it's with anything that's...
It's a little short, because here, the mitzvah is la fuke what you're going for.
The mitzvah is specifically not to smell. Right. You're saying if here the mitzvah is to not smell, is there an issur to smell before Sukkot or after Sukkot? It doesn't make it usher to smell.
I'm saying you don't even have the option of
you do. You can smell before and after.
Something about food, right? You have so much could be used as a food, and something can be used as not food, right? So you say, okay, we don't want to use it for food. We use it for. But here, what you want to use it for is even la fuke. You can't even use it for.
Okay, maybe. Okay, now Esrog. Okay, the next one we talk about is Esrog. We saw some time ago that there's a machlokes whether an esrog's status depends on when you cut it off the ground or whether it had its chanata, when it had its beginning of its growing, certain stage at the beginning of the growing. The din is, the ikar din we say is that it follows chanata, and therefore the esrog of Shemittah is the esrog that we have in the 8th year, right after Sukkot. But the Rambam holds that, and there's a sheet in the Gemara that it goes basa kita when you pick it off the ground. And therefore, that's not the din to be machmir for that, but in practice, that's what people do. And the esrogim that are used in the 7th year are picked before Rosh Hashanah in order to avoid picking them during Shemittah. Okay. We also saw, when we talked about Schora, that the Mishnah says that there's an issur to buy Perish Shvias, because if you buy them from somebody, among the other things is if you're going to end up giving the money to someone who's not going to treat it with Kedusha Shvias, Moshe to make Shvias Namaretz, and therefore the Mishnah says is, what you should do is, the Mishnah talks about the schar of it, and we're going to have more to say about that as well, and therefore the Mishnah says that if you buy something without Kedusha Shvias, and the esrog comes along with it. Okay, that way you have a chain for that thing. Okay, another thing we spoke about for esrog, we've talked about, just giving you some back of the stuff that we've done already, is that if let's say a person would get an esrog that was from a person who did not keep Shemittah, okay, we saw that so the potential problems with the esrog are meshumer and nevad, and we saw that the ikar din is to be makel about those. There are those who are machmir, the ikar din is to be makel, and therefore if you got an esrog which was meshumer and nevad, I got an esrog from someone who didn't keep Shemittah, then the din is that it would be mutter to use it anyhow. Okay, it would be kosher for the mitzvah. Well, Maisa, that's not true. That's not where the esrogim come from. People who grow esrogim for the mitzvah are trying to make it that everyone can use them. They grow them in Oitzer Bezdin. People grow their esrogim as Oitzer Bezdin. They do keep Shemittah. People are not going to want to buy esrogim that from someone who didn't keep Shemittah. And there, the big question that people have is, well, one of the dinim of things that have Kedusha Shvias, things that Oitzer Bezdin have Kedusha Shvias, is how can you take that thing and send it to America? How can one of the dinim of things with Kedusha Shvias is you're not allowed to send it out of Eretz Yisrael. So how could it be that the esrogim that were grown with Kedusha Shvias, the people in Eretz Yisrael have no problem with having this esrogim, but how do we get those esrogim? Okay, and there are some Taka who were makbid. Chazanish was very strong, and others were even stronger than the Chazanish about not sending those esrogim to Chotzaretz. I believe the Chazanish was makel if that was the only way you're going to get a kosher esrog. The others who are more makel and say no. Maybe a guy should take it out of Eretz Yisrael, or they say maybe the whole reason not to take it out of Eretz Yisrael is because you want to make sure you do beer, and therefore, if you make sure you're going to send it back for the beer time, that's also going to be good enough. Maybe it's okay because a person's allowed to take out one at a time, so Bezdin is taking it out for all of us one at a time. Maybe that's okay. There's the possibilities. Lamaisa is we are going to have a esrogim from Eretz Yisrael. That's what's going to happen. We are going to have a esrogim from.
They're not going to send it back either.
And most people are not going to send it back. Now, it's going to be a little bit of a game, which is you really have to send it back for beer. Okay, but the beer for esrogim is not right after Sukkot. A week after Sukkot, my esrog is going to not need beer anymore. It's going to be all dried out and not need beer anyhow. So. In theory, they're sending it to us that we should send it back in time for beer, but in practice, by the time the beer comes, it's not going to need to be sent back. So
return of
yeah, exactly. So maybe
post your picture.
But the mean is a person can't make esrog jelly out of their esrog this year. If you have an esrog from Eretz Yisrael and you want to make esrog jelly, you can make esrog jelly. You're just going to have to eat it up by the time it comes time of beer. Okay, you're going to have to get rid of it in time and you have to follow all the rules of how to use things with Kedusha Shmias. If you want to do that.
What's my beer on
I don't know, but is that what it is?
Somewhere around.
Okay, so yeah, eat your esrog jelly by then.
What
Get rid of it.
should you do with your esrog?
So what happens is once it dries out, once it's not edible anymore, you don't need to do beer on it anymore. So, if he's at Tu B'Shvat at the time, by Tu B'Shvat, my esrog is going to be long gone. It's going to be hopeless. It's not going to be... So the chiv, you wouldn't be able to throw it in the garbage. Not regularly, you could throw your esrog in the garbage. If it has Kedusha Shmias. Yeah, I'm saying when it's edible. It's still usable. When the day after Sukkot, then you're allowed to just throw it in the garbage. So that you couldn't do now. I guess you could eat it if you want to, but again, you're not mechuyev to eat it. You just let it sit around. Okay. Some other things we saw about that is Bezdin is only allowed to charge. The Oitz Bezdin is only allowed to charge for their labor and packaging and shipping and things like that. They're not allowed to charge for the fruit itself. And Mamela, we saw that they can't say that this esrog costs $5 and this esrog costs $10 because what's the difference in this one and that one? The same effort went into making both esrogim. So they're not allowed to charge. And the way they do that to be even more advanced is they make them closed boxes. Okay, you don't even get to pick which one you want to. Which that's not really the thing. You don't really have to close boxes. But if they had open boxes, people would pay more for certain ones. They tend to do it if they do it in closed boxes, and they say you're getting from Oitz Bezdin because this is how much it costs for the esrog for the delivery, blah 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 blah, and that's it. No more, no cost for the thing. We saw that the practice is they make tiers. Okay, this is, if you remember, we spoke about this, that people were uncomfortable, but they make tiers. In other words, these will be $10 esrogim, $20 esrogim, $30 esrogim. Okay, in closed boxes, which is to say, like more or less muhuter, even though really there shouldn't be, and we asked it at that time. We spoke about that. That l'chayra, they should be the same. You're paying for the delivery. It doesn't cost more to deliver a kosher esrog than a puzzle esrog. But that's in practice what they do, and whatever. Look the other way. It really what it is that in order for Bezdin to be functional and to earn their money for all the effort they put into it, this is a business practice that they're allowed to do. The less you pay me because you're not charging the room. That's one way to look at it. Okay.
Bezdin never creates them. It's the
merchant. The merchants. Well, the merchants are only allowed to sell. They're not allowed to charge for the fruit. So if Bezdin says to them, these are Sug Aleph, these are Sug Beis, these are Sug Gimel, they break them into parts and tell the guy, okay, these charge $10, $20, $30 for it, then they're not doing this supposed to. That the person who's...
I'm paying for the Lulav, really.
So if you pay for the Lulav, that's what the Mishnah says, but we're going to talk about that. If you pay for the Lulav, then you should get the esrog, any esrog you want to for free. Mm-hmm. Why there's different grades of esrogim? You're saying, I'm getting the esrog for free. Okay, I'll take whichever one I want to. So I want the Sug Aleph one. You say, no. Well, your price, you only get a Sug Gimel. What do you mean? What? They're all the same. And I am allowed to pay for the esrog. I'm allowed to pay for all the non-fruit parts of the esrog. For how much it costs them to pick it off the tree and to water the trees when they were allowed to. To a box.
The guy can't say, let's say he has different grades of Lulav. You can't say, if you take a type of Lulav and I'm charging you $150 for Lulav, then you can take a type of esrog.
How can he? He's the representative of Bezdin. All he did was pull off the fruit off the tree and bring it to town. He's allowed to charge you for the delivery cost.
I'm not paying anything for esrog.
So why is he allowed to tell you which esrog you're allowed to take? The esrog,
why not? It's just, if you're why not?
No, because
you're not not selling anything altogether, right?
It's not his. It's Hefker. Anyone's allowed to take them. What there is that he could charge you for all these delivery costs, all these side costs. So he's allowed to charge you for those things. As a representative of Bezdin, okay, so I can pay that. I can't walk off 10 esrogim. I have to pay them for that. But why are you telling me which one I should take? Did it cost you more to package the good esrog than the worse esrog? No, it's silly. That's what I'm saying.
Unless is it possible to have Omni say that you can charge a discount for...
You're playing games.
I know.
If you charge more for one than another, you're paying for the esrog. Okay. I gotta move on, guys. We have too much to do. Okay. One little last thing I'll remind you that Rabbi Yashav had said was that there's a kula that you're allowed to do malachas d'Rabbanan in order to keep a tree growing or for the fruit to grow well. If you remember that from way long ago, Rabbi Yashav said that's only to make the fruit more appealing, more edible, etc. It's not to do things that make it more muhudah for mitzvah. Okay, there's no kula to do things. So if you want to do malachas to make your esrog be beautiful for the mitzvah, no deal. You could water it so you'll actually have an esrog, but not do things to it that would protect it for the mitzvah. Okay, now, I told you that the Ursamerch says that if you pick something off for the mitzvah, if you grow something and pick it for the mitzvah, then it has no Kedusha Shvius to it. So he says, so you think that's the same thing for Esrog also? So maybe Esrog shouldn't have, Esrog is edible, but hey, you did it for the mitzvah, so maybe it shouldn't have Kedusha Shvius. He says, I know that that's wrong. I'm here to think.
Why is that?
He says, I know that it's wrong, because there's a Yerushalmi in Orla that says, if you pick an Esrog for the mitzvah, does that have Kedusha Shvius or not? He says, what's Yerushalmi B'Supik about? What's going on? Didn't I just tell you that there's a rule that if you did it for the mitzvah that it doesn't have Kedusha Shvius? He says, so what's going on in Yerushalmi? So he said, no, Esrog is different. All other mitzvahs, if you pick it for the mitzvah, it doesn't have Kedusha, it's not considered an Eichel. But by Esrog, there's a special din the Gemara says that an Esrog has to be royal achila. Okay? I'm not 100% understanding how he says this, but we'll accept his word on it, that an Esrog has to be royal achila. The Gemara does say something like that. Has to be royal achila, and therefore, when a person is picking an Esrog for the mitzvah, they are subconsciously picking something for eating. Because if it wouldn't be fit for eating, then they wouldn't be picking it for the mitzvah. The mitzvah needs it to be something that's suitable for eating. Hadassim don't need that, but Esrog do need that. An Ezoi for a paraduma doesn't need to be fit for eating, but an Esrog needs to be fit for eating. So when I say I'm growing this and I'm picking this in order to do the mitzvah with it, I'm without realizing what I'm saying, I'm taking something that's royal achila, and therefore the Yerushalmi is Mesupik. Maybe that's enough to consider it that I took a la'oichel. I really took it for the mitzvah. But there's some kind of a background thought of it has to be for achila. That's Yerushalmi Mesupik. Maybe that makes it consider that I took it for the achila also. Now, obviously, everyone seems to assume, as he does, that we're machmir on that shaila. Okay, we're machmir on that shaila. That the fact that in order to be kosher for the mitzvah, it has to be royal achila, means that I had in mind for achila also, even though I didn't. No, most people that I know don't eat the Esrog. They don't have any in mind to eat it, but having in mind for the mitzvah includes that you had it in mind for the achilos. Okay. Next. Now we're finished with Esrog, and our last one is a Lulav. Lulav is like this. The Mishnah that I told you that says of what you do if you want to buy an Esrog on Shemittah, an Esrog of Shemittah says if you want to buy the Esrog, I'm sorry, it doesn't say that. If you buy a Lulav on Shemittah, then the person should give you the Esrog with it. Why? Because the implication is the Lulav has no Kedusha Shvius. You're allowed to pay whatever you want to for the Lulav. You don't have to worry about giving Shemitah money to somebody. And no Kedusha gets on the money for buying the Lulav. And then the Esrog, he gives you along with it. And the Esrog, now you didn't give any money for the thing with Kedusha Shvius, and therefore the money that you gave him doesn't have any Kedusha to it.
Why didn't we give you the eights by the Lulav? Why didn't we give you the eights also by the Aravos? By Aravos,
a question. A question. I'm not sure if I know the answer to that question. Okay. So the okay. All of them. Okay. Okay. So the question is like this. Now the Gemara doesn't know what to do with that. The Gemara says, really? What does it help to buy the Lulav? The Lulav also has Kedusha Shvius. So what did you gain by buying a Lulav and getting an Esrog with it? Lulav also have Kedusha Shvius. So most people, when they read the Gemara, they're scratching their head. Lulav has Kedusha Shvius? You ever see anybody eating a Lulav? What are you talking about? Who eats Lulav? So, you eat the dates that grow on a Lulav tree, but you don't eat the Lulav, it's just a piece of wood. So, Rashi explains, later in the Gemara, Rashi explains that what it means is like this. A Lulav can be used as a broom. In order to have Kedusha Shvius, it doesn't have to only be edible. We saw that it's anything that's called Hana'asin or Bi'ur Shava, and certain other criteria. It means the way when you use it, that also destroys it. That also destroys it. That's in the trunk. That when you use it, you destroy it. It has Kedusha Shvius, and therefore, when a person uses a broom, the use of the broom, sweeping the floor, is what eventually wears out the leaves, wears out the broom. So it's Hana'asin and Bi'ur Shava, and therefore, even though nobody eats palm branches, even so it has Kedusha Shvius, because it's something that the Hana, it grows in the ground, and the Hana and the Bi'ur happen at the same time. The destruction and the benefit from it happen at the same time. So the Gemara says that it has Kedusha Shvius. I'm going to tell you in a second, well, if it has Kedusha Shvius, how do you answer its question, right? So what happened? The Gemara said, I'll tell you in short, the Gemara says it's talking about that you had a Lulav. You had a Lulav from before Shemitah, and the Esrog that was from on Shemitah. Okay? the mission when the mission you bought the lulav is because it happened to work out that you had a lulav from before Shemitah. I'll explain to you what that means in a second. Okay, so the question is, if you look in the Pirushim Shais, the Rambam, you see that the Rambam says, he brings the Mishnah that says if you buy the lulav and you get the esrog with it, and he says, and you know why you could. In general, it does. In the case of the Mishnah, it happens to not have kedusha shvius.
Came from the year before.
And Aravos,
Aravos do not have any kedusha shvius. None. No big difference when it goes.
Why did people
Because the lulav is used as a broom. People don't use Arava brooms
Because you couldn't use it.
because that was a typical use is used as a broom. So, in the Pirushim Shais, the Rambam says he brings this Mishnah says you buy the lulav and you get the esrog with it. So the Rambam says, and the lulav, you know why it doesn't have? You know why you're allowed to buy the lulav? Because lulav is a piece of wood, and wood doesn't have any kedusha shvius to it. So the Kohen say, wait a second. That's not what the Gemara said. The Gemara said it's special because it's from the 6th year. So the Rambam Pirushim Shai says that. Just as an aside, if you look in the newer versions of the Pirushim Shais, the new translations of the Arabic, bring that if you look at the Ksav Yad, the handwritten versions of the Arabic Rambam, it says the reason why the lulav doesn't have kedusha shvius is it's from the 6th year. And since it's from the 6th year, it doesn't have kedusha shvius, exactly like the Gemara says. And there's a line drawn across it. And in the Rambam's handwriting, he says the pshat that it says right now, which is that it's because lulav don't have kedusha shvius. Okay, lulav don't have kedusha shvius. Okay, so what's going on over here? Well, what happened? The Gemara says not like that. I mean, it would be dramatic. It would be bad enough just to see it, but to see that you crossed it out and rewrote a new pshat. I mean, what happened over here? The Gemara says that it does have kedusha shvius to it. And then you look in the Rambam in the Mishnah Torah, and the Rambam brings the Mishnah as is. He says if you buy the lulav and you get the esrog with him, he goes on and on. It doesn't say anything about it being from the 6th year. So what happened? What's going on over here? Well, what happened to the Gemara that says no, lulav do have kedusha shvius? The Rambam is saying it where we would have read it, which that lulav don't have kedusha shvius. The Gemara says that they do have kedusha shvius.
Doesn't say anything on that?
I'm going to get to that in a second. So I'm going to tell you two answers that I couldn't get to that. The Kashrus tomorrow, right there on the Gemara says, okay, I'm not trying to explain you this whole thing. The Gemara Daf Mem is talking about something else about kedusha shvius. The Gemara says over here that Eitz in the Mishkan, there's certain kinds of wood that theoretically should have kedusha shvius. The Gemara thinks that it does, and the Gemara says, you know what? Basically, most wood is not Hana'asa B'Yur and Shava, and therefore, even though this wood is Hana'asa B'Yur and Shava, doesn't have kedusha shvius. That's what the Gemara says. A certain piece of wood, type of wood, wood, when it says, nah, it doesn't. All the wood looks at the same. We don't divide one piece of wood from another piece of wood. They're all the same. They don't have kedusha shvius. So he says, when the Gemara said that, it was a chazara from this original assumption. Even though we would assume that palm branches are used as brooms, and Shava, in the end of the Gemara it said all wood is looked at the same. Basically, wood can't be used for anything that's Hanasa B'Yur and Shava, and therefore the Gemara was chayzer from its assumption that lulav don't have kedusha shvius. That's the Kashrus tomorrow says. Dar Sameach says, remember I told you Dar Sameach says, when you cut off a lulav for the mitzvah, I don't care if theoretically palm branches have kedusha shvius because you could use them to sweep your house. That's for a regular palm branch. And if I cut off a palm branch in order to do the mitzvah with it, then that palm branch inherently cannot have kedusha shvius to it. I bedafted it and I picked it up for the mitzvah. It automatically does not have this step.
Esrog
So he says Esrog was special. Remember, the Esrog was a special thing. A lulav automatically does not have kedusha shvius. So he says, wait a second, you guys were against me. But the Gemara says it does. So what I'm telling you, based on the Rambam and Hilchos Paraduma, that it doesn't. He says, what are you talking about? But the Gemara right here in Sukkos says that it does have it. So he says that Lushikas. He says the Gemara in this Rambam that I told you at Hilchos Paraduma about the Esrog, if you cut it from the mitzvah, it's actually a machlokes in a Mishnah in Masechtas Para. Okay, a Mishnah Masechtas Para, and who are the names? Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon say that it has if it's cut off from the mitzvah, it has no kedusha, and Rabbi Meir says that it does have kedusha. Okay, so our Gemara is going to Stam Mishnah Reb Meir. The Mishnah assumed when we read this Mishnah, we assumed it's going according to Reb Meir, and Reb Meir says that palm branch, that Esrog is considered a food even if you cut it off for the mitzvah. So the Gemara has a question. So then a lulav should also have that. But the din is that we're passing like Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, and Reb Shimon that it has no kedusha, and therefore the whole Gemara, we don't have to worry about the whole Gemara. That's what he says. So now, that's his answer. So he wants to say, so the din is really, Lulav do not have kedusha shvius because they were cut off for the mitzvah. So my question, Yankee, you're missing your question. I'm taking his part. You can leave. I'm asking your question.
Okay.
So my question on that is, I'm going to try to finish it. Matt, you can go.
I want to hear the answer.
The question is, why are we hearing this question? Okay, can someone tell me, why are we hearing this question from the Kappas Tamarim and from the Ursamer? Why isn't anybody on the pages in this question? Okay, how come we open up the Rambam? We didn't see the people on the pages in this question. Rabbi Kveger,
Page of the Rambam?
yeah, in Mishnah Torah. Rabbi Kveger on Mishnayos, he's going to Pirush on Mishnayos. He sees that the Rav says like the Rambam says in Pirush on Mishnayos, so he says, I don't understand this. What's going on over here? What happened to the Gemara? I mean, if you read a Pirush on this, it's an obvious question. What's going on over here? You know what Rabbi Kveger says? He says, I don't know what the answer is. He says, and then I saw the Kappas Tamarim ask the question. He doesn't say his answer. He just said, I saw he asked the question. I was talking right. That the Gemara says not like this. Okay, so where is everybody? Why, when we open up Mishnah Torah, do you not see that people? Why are people saying something? The Gemara was chayzer from it. It's going to only according to a mayor. Say something. Well, where is everybody on the page saying there do a lot of people live before the Ursamech? You know, between the Ram and the Ursamech, there's lots of pirushim. Why doesn't someone talk about it? It seems like a pretty obvious thing. The Gemara says that it's only in a very specific case. It makes me wonder that maybe Pshat is not like that. Makes me wonder that. It makes me wonder like this. I don't know if I'm right. I'll say what I think. Everyone, the Kappas Tamarim is saying that the Rambam is l'shitasa to what he says in Pirush Mishnayos. And I'm wondering if l'shitasa to a different Rambam, not to this Rambam. Which is, if you remember, when we spoke, I mentioned it at the beginning of the day today, but we talked about it before, that in Hilchos Ma'aser Sheni, the Rambam paskins, that Esrog is Basar L'Kita. And Esrog's Kedusha is treated by the year when you pull it off the ground. Most Rishonim disagree with that. From Chagis in the Gemara, most Rishonim Paskin that no, Esrog is Basar Chanata. The Rama hold that it's Basar L'Kita. So now, when the Gemara said, the Gemara asked the question, doesn't a Lulav have Kedusha Shvius? So the Gemara says, well, it's talking about that the Lulav was from the 6th year and the Esrog was from the 7th year. Isn't that a strange case? I mean, what a crazy Hechetimtza. How could you bring that in and not say that there's this unusual Hechetimtza? I don't think that's a question. The Chiddush of the Gemara is not that the Lulav is from the 6th year and the Esrog is from the 7th year. It's like this. The Mishnah says, Halakech Lulav mechaver b'shvius. You buy a Lulav in Shvius. Well, if you buy a Lulav in Shvius, if you buy on Shemittah, the Lulav for sure has no Kedusha on it. A Lulav that you buy on Shemittah for sure has no Kedusha. It was bought from the year beforehand. So, what are they even talking about? The Esrog also shouldn't have it. So the Chiddush of the Gemara is not that the Lulav is from one year and the Esrog is from a different year. The Chiddush is that we're going only to one Mandama who holds Esrog Basar L'Kita. If Esrog is Basar L'Kita, then when it says B'Shvius, it doesn't mean of Shvius, one with Kedusha Shvius, it means one during the physical year of Shemitah. If you buy an Esrog on Shemitah and a Lulav on Shemitah, and once we're going to according to that Man Yamar, it's obvious that the Esrog has Kedusha Shvius and the Lulav does not have Kedusha Shvius. Because a Lulav bought on Shemitah is from the year before Shemitah. And the Esrog is, you just bought it now. You just took it off the tree now. So it of course it does have Kedusha. So if you pass like the Rambam, that Esrog is Basar L'Kita, and I say, I'm buying a Lulav and an Esrog on Shemitah, I don't have to tell you that the Esrog has Kedusha and the Lulav doesn't have Kedusha. It's obvious. If I buy the Esrog on Shemitah, when you're on Shemitah, the Esrog is from Shemitah, and the Lulav is from before Shemitah. It's automatic. That's what the Gemara the Chiddush of the Gemara is not that it's talking about this strange case. The Chiddush of the Gemara is that it's going according to the Man Yamar that treats Esrog and Lulav differently. Most people would think not like that. Most people think.
So you're saying that's what the Rambam means when he says the Lulav doesn't have Kedusha Shemitah?
No, I'm not talking about the Pirush Mishnayos. I'm talking about in the Mishnah Torah. He brings the Mishnah. If you buy a Lulav on Shemitah, then you should buy the Lulav and get Esrog with it. There's no Chiddush to that. If you buy a Lulav on Shemitah, a Lulav bought on Shemitah is a Lulav from the 6th year.
The Rambam doesn't say in Mishnah Torah that because the Lulav doesn't have...
No, he doesn't say that. Only the Pirush Mishnayos. No, he just brings the Mishnah word for it. I'm not word for it from the Mishnah. If you buy a Lulav on Shemitah, this is what you should do. Well, if I buy a Lulav on Shemitah, the Lulav is automatically from before Rama L'Shita. Sorry, the Lulav is automatically a Shish's Lulav, and the Esrog is automatically a Shvius Lulav. Because they weren't commercial. They bought an Esrog and they walked over the tree and they took it off the tree on the day before Sukkot. So once the Rambam passes that Esrog is Basar Lakita, then the Mishnah reads, the Mishnah, it's obvious that the case of the Mishnah is that the Lulav is from the 6th year and the Esrog is from the 7th year. It sort of goes hand in hand. If you're Bish Shvius, in other words, you could read the Mishnah, Bish Shvius means of the Kedusha of Shvius. But the Gemara says, no, that's not what it means. Bish Shvius is literal, on Shvius, on the 7th year. Sukkot on the 7th year, it's right at the beginning. The Lulav has no Kedusha because it's from the 6th year, and the Esrog is from the 7th year.
Why we know that you got the Lulav before him?
No, the Lulav goes Basar Chanata. The Lulav for
sure happened.
For sure, that's in the 6th year. That's obvious that the Chanata of the Lulav happened during the 6th year. No, I mean, Lulav, no bullet fast. And obviously it happened during the 6th year. And the Esrog goes Basar Lakita. It goes when you pulled it off the day before Sukkot. You pulled it off the ground. So once the Chiddush of the Gemara is just that, we're going to that Maniyamar. Once we're in that Maniyamar, that the case is not the Chiddush. The case, even though that's what it sounds like, one's from one year, one's from a different year, that's not the Chiddush. The Chiddush is that they have different statuses. Okay, now, all that I told you about Lulav is I can only use it almost theoretical. Well, many people think it's theoretical. That's because Rosham Zalman says, he says this whole discussion works with an assumption that a lulav might have kedusha shvius because you use it for a broom. Okay, that's the whole basis that the Gemara has why a lulav should have kedusha shvius because hanasim and shava. He says nobody in my neighborhood uses a lulav for a broom. You see anybody walking around using a broom? I mean, no. Now, there's such a thing. I actually found you could buy a little broom. I mean, a wicker or whatever. A palm branch broom. But I mean, regular people don't use palm branches. I don't know what they do with them, but they don't use it for that. Yeah. Yes, you can. You can buy it. But he says, nobody does that. He says, so what do I care that there's, in the times of the Gemara, that might have been a normal way to use a lulav. He says, but that doesn't do with me. Now, he says, he's answering a question from the, he's answering a question. He says like this, the person who asked the question said to him, well, we had this shiloh before him. He says, remember we had a shiloh about orange peels? We say, should we treat orange peels as kedusha, or let's say other fruit peels, as kedusha shvius, because animals can eat them? And the shiloh we had there was, the fact that animals can eat them, does that mean anything? What do I mean? I mean is that animals can eat it, but there are no animals here in town that can eat them. Okay? So if I'm in 50 in Illinois, and I have cows to feed it to, then I have to worry about that animals can have kedusha shvius. But if I live in Chicago, there aren't any cows around to eat these leftovers. So I can't say, there are those who say, and which he thinks is correct, that it has no kedusha shvius. The fact that theoretically it could be used, or objectively it could be used to feed to animals, doesn't have kedusha shvius because there aren't any animals around here. So he says, and even if you want to say that for foods, that might be one thing to say for food items. But this is just a lulav. It's not a food item. The fact that you can use it as a broom, if nobody uses it for a broom, that doesn't have kedusha shvius. Okay, now that leads us to our last thing. Hopefully you appreciate the last thing, which is schach. Schach. We're not talking about schach. Okay, which is
by share about buying from the market when they have different tier prices.
It's considered acceptable. It's considered acceptable. You shouldn't be paying more for one than the next, but and they do it in closed boxes. They say all the ones in here, these are the olive ones. Those are the best. These are the beige ones. They're not as good. And these are the Gimel, the kosher, but they're just good.
They do that here. I mean, my oats are basically when it gets to the milk over here.
Yeah.
They do that. They went to a closed boxes.
I believe so. That's my impression.
I remember seeing them some.
We're going to find out in a few months.
And you want to have a right to see what you're buying.
Okay, we'll see in a few months. Okay, now the question is like this.
Somebody like to open here?
Open the box.
I mean,
Well,
if an importer brings in 100,000 boxes of suitcases, the importer wants it in America.
Well, what's he going to do if he opens it up? He's going to say, lady, you want that one? That's a really good one. $25 for you. You want a closed box? $15. I'm saying he's charging you for your fruit. But he's not supposed to do that. He's not supposed to. Whether he's going to do, I don't know. Okay, now let's just finish up, which is like this. Is there any reason that you could imagine, I can, why bamboo should have kedusha shvius to it? Okay, now people eat, bamboo shoots. Okay, but there's any and the I'm not talking about the bamboo you buy in Home Depot. Seriously, sir. Bamboo that you buy there, that's already dried out. That's not a question. What about the fact? What about fresh bamboo, which I believe you can buy in Eretz Yisrael? They sell on the street corner. Fresh bamboo, just freshly cut off the ground. So, what? I'm getting. So the question is, should you say? Here's the question. They're used as animal food. Pandas eat bamboo. So should you say that since pandas eat bamboo, that's basically the whole diet is bamboo. So should you say it's Michael Behema, it's suitable for animals? And should we say that since it's suitable for animals, it should have Kedusha Shvius? Because animals eat it. So domesticated. I'm getting. So now, let me finish my question. Was it maybe worse during last Shemittah? Because in 2005, the Israeli zoo, the biblical zoo in Yerushalayim, bought a panda. That was the first time they had it. Well, that we know that they had a panda. They traded it for a giraffe and 50,000 shekel. I'm sorry, 2 giraffes and 50,000 shekel. They got a panda. Okay, Shimon. They call him Simon, Shimon, and so they bought him. So during the last Shemittah, they had a panda. Now, in 2012, there was a Leviah, and Simon the panda died. Okay, so he didn't make it to the Shemittah. So last Shemittah, did they have a more serious question? Because there was a panda in Yerushalayim who could eat bamboo. So was that a shaila? Or should we say is, come on guys, one panda, one Meshuggah panda who eats it, we shouldn't care about that. Or, as David just reminded us, I was going to say, when I was in Hong Kong, okay, in the Mongkok mall, there's this huge outdoor, blocks and blocks of a zillion people selling everything. Yeah, and they sell bamboo juice, which I don't know I want to tell you, but I had some. They take a stick of bamboo, stick it through a juicer, and out comes this green, horrific-looking liquid, which tastes almost as good as it looks. And fresh bamboo, and they put it in. So should we say, because in China, in Hong Kong, there are people who are paying money to eat this stuff, so it's not Michael Behema, it's Michael Adam. People can eat this stuff. Okay, what do we say? Hello, if you have to go to Mongkok to buy this stuff, and nobody in Beitar eats this.
Because of
right, there's one, I'm the one with sugar. Okay, but I wasn't the only one. This guy had to stay not just for me, He had to stay not just, So should we say, so seemingly, it's going to depend on the same question that I said to you just a second ago about the Lulav nowadays, or we talked about from Michael Behema. If we look at something in its objective sense, is it royal achila? Is it royal achila? Like we said, peels of fruits. Yeah, animals can eat them. Or the Lulav, they could be used for sweeping, but Lamai said no one's using them for that. So there are those who want to be mach on that child. So Shem Zalman says, he doesn't talk about bamboo sticks and Mongkok. No, he doesn't know about that. But he says to them, tell me, he says, every single branch has some animal who eats it. He's being, a little, putting stuff on a limb, so to speak, but everybody's eating something, everybody's eating. He says, come on, we can't think about every crazy way there is to eat something. He says, how can you tell me that objective? In theory, is there anyone eat this? Eucalyptus leaves, they eat, giraffes eat them. So they have Kedusha Shvius them? Come on. So we have to so he says, therefore, he thinks it's correct that a person should judge things only by what's in his going on Lamaisa. If we live in Chicago, or you live in Beit Shemesh, and people in that town, they use it in a certain way, that's Hamal Sabir and Shava, or they use it for Michael Adam, Michael Behema, has Kedusha Shvius. If it's not Lamaisa used in your place, you don't have to worry about the fact that theoretically it's used for that. So according to him, we would be safe.